Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to Game Masters 911. I am your host. I'm GeoQuester. And to my left is the lady with the big boobs herself, the mistress of darkness, Susie Q. Wait, but where's Susie Q? She's not here. She's not feeling well. So we have tonight a guest hostess. Some that you may recognize, some you may not recognize, but guest hostess, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
It's only the freshest. It's me, Mint, guys.
Welcome, Mint, to Game Masters 911 is our guest host because little Miss Susie Q is not feeling well today. She has been down for the count. So, before we get started, let me let you all know, since Susie Q is not around to catch your questions for me, please PM Mint LaFresh in chat, or if you ask them out loud in chat, my mods will pick them up and put them in the admin channel chat for us. First order of business tonight are a few announcements. Number one is we have a giveaway going on for a Steam game for free for all of you. As some of you may or may not know, I and Susie Q follow Geek Fuel, which is a monthly box of prizes and bullshit that comes in the mail full of all sorts of geeky goodness. And in this month, we got a game. Now, my wife and I don't play most of the Steam games because we just don't. So we have been amassing a horde of Steam game codes that one of you is going to win one of those Steam games this evening. The Steam game is called Dandy, also known as A Glimpse of the Life of the Candy Alchemist. So it's a really long fucking name. That's all I gotta say. The thing takes up like 17 lines of fucking text. So, but we're just gonna call it Dandy. So, you get your first ticket for free by putting in !ticket and then the number 1. Or you can buy extra tickets with your experience points that you get from watching my stream. So please go ahead, buy tickets, and you'll have an opportunity to win before the end of tonight's episode. You'll have a chance to win Dandy as a game for yourselves. And please be sure to let us know in our Discord channel what the hell this Dandy game's all about. So that's announcement number 1. Number 2 is, as some of you saw on Sunday, it was our last episode of Wraithborn Blood of the Crown for this season. I know Mint is unhappy about that.
It's so sad.
It is. It's very, very sad. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to put spoilers in. I'm not going to say anything about it. Now there's Mint. But if anybody wants to catch up on... Yeah. If anybody wants to catch up on any of the episodes, you can go to our YouTube channel by typing in !YouTube in chat, and you'll be able to go over there and you'll be able to find all sorts of good stuff. Number 3 is in replacement for some of the games that we have been playing. Like, for example, Ravenloft is currently on a holiday hiatus since it's Christmas time, and New Year's time will be coming up very shortly. So our Game Master Melvin has decided to take a hiatus for about a month and a half, 2 months. In that interim period, I've decided to run a couple of games on Saturdays and Sundays. On Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time in the U.S., I am going to be running Lost Mines of Phandelver. Of course, it has been out forever and a day, so most of you have already played it. So I'm going to turn it up on its head a little bit. We've already got, I believe, 4 players signed up already off of our Discord server, and we have 2 spots left. So if you want to go ahead and join it, please come on over to our Discord server and sign up. Also, on Sundays, to replace Blood of the Crown for the time being, I am running Adventure League games, a new Adventure League game every single week. This Sunday it is going to be DDEX 0101, also known as Defiance in Flan. If you haven't played that yet, or if you'd like to play something like that, please head over to alonlinetools.com and sign up for Adventure League games over there. Speaking of Adventure League games, there's been a little bit of a shake-up in the news on that. Please be sure to check out the Wizards website at dnd.wizards.com to find out all the most current information about the Adventurers League. Other than that, I think it's about time we kick this pig off. What do you think, Ben? All right.
That was my worst pig noise ever.
Yeah, that is about the worst pig noise ever. I've heard a pig make that noise before.
Nose, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, all right, go ahead.
All right, so I'm gonna kick it off with this one here. When using Find Familiar, can you summon a real creature instead of the spirit form?
That is a color thing. It says that you're supposed to be able to just summon the spirit. While that's cool, having a spirit cat or a spirit frog running around is kind of cool. But I find it even more useful to have the real animal running around next to you. A physical cat or a physical toad or a physical pseudo dragon hanging out on your shoulder. In games that would be espionage-based, fantasy games, having a familiar that you could utilize to walk into a tavern, we'll say, and it lays down next to the fire and pretends to be sleeping while you're actually listening to the enemy's plans, for rebellion against the king or whatever, that would be much more akin to a living, breathing familiar. But, that also being said, I would say that they'd also have about the same stats as an animal of the same kind. So therefore, it's up to the game master, I'd say. I can see why a spirit familiar would be cool, but I would much prefer to see the regular old animal just hanging out there next to the wizard instead of something ethereal.
Animal sitting by your side.
Yes.
All right. Next one has to do with another skill. Can I use Mage Hand, hold a shield, and defend myself at the same time?
Okay. Mage Hand can only hold a certain amount of weight. Once again, it also depends on if it's a sorcerer or a wizard casting certain things. But Mage Hand can only a certain amount of weight, which shields are above, I believe they're above 5 pounds a piece. And Mage Hand doesn't move. It doesn't move in a way that would be conducive to utilizing a defensive shield. It's not that intuitive. It's kind of like having an auto driver in your car and you're coming up to an accident. It doesn't know to respond fast enough, and you can't control the magic to respond fast enough of such a simple spell to be able to move the shield to guard you. So I don't think you should be able to utilize it that way.
All right. Big one here that I know there's a lot of people in the stream right now that could use some of this information. Explain what the SOD is.
Okay, we had a conversation about this. I started a conversation about this earlier this morning when we were talking about the differences between Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds. And a number of people were saying, not just one person, but many people have told me over the years that Roll20 utilizes D&D and you get it for free. Why do I need to go and play something like Fantasy Grounds where I have to buy everything? Um, well, you're not getting D&D for free on Roll20 or on Fantasy Grounds because they both come with something called the SRD, which is the Systems Reference Document. It is the document that was published by Wizards of the Coast for publishers to be able to say, hey, these are the rules, these are the spells, these are the monsters, these are the character classes and the abilities that you have free rights to use at any point in time and not have to worry about copyright infringement. You can always tell if you're looking at something that has an SRD attached to it, or as we in the business call it, the open gaming content, or what was it? Open OGC, yeah, OGC content. Um, you can tell because if you look at, for example, the monsters, it's the easiest place to look. The player's handbook, the monster manual, and the DMG utilize things like carrion crawlers and beholders. If you look at the SRD, those two very specific monsters are missing because they are not considered to be open material. They are considered to be intellectual property of Wizards of the Coast, and therefore you cannot use them outside of their canon products. So that's what the SRD is. The SRD is free rules, but not all the rules.
So basically, a taste, but not the whole meal.
It's sorta most of the meal. There we go. It's most of the meal, but it's missing some very key elements to really fill it out.
All right, I just got a shout from a question that I asked before about the mage hands. Somebody's asking, would the AT Rogue mage hand, would its Legerdemain skill affect that idea?
Um, Holding a shield? No, it wouldn't. I don't believe it would affect the shield. However, it does have fine dexterity, so therefore it can wiggle its fingers, which unfortunately one of the rogues in my game can no longer do. Um, it can wiggle its
Sucks to be
fingers and
armless.
yeah, sucks to be handless. Yes. Hey, do you need a hand? Um, it's it has the fine motor coordination to be able to manipulate picks and locks and do those sorts of things. To use some pickpockets. It can palm an object. It can, do some other very small, dainty kind of things. But once again, the idea of holding a shield to hold back an attack, no, it does not have that ability.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump back to another question dealing with the Fantasy Grounds. What kind of tiles for map building are there for Fantasy Grounds?
Now, this isn't just for Fantasy Grounds. This would be for Roll20 as well, along with Google Hangouts, your own tabletop games at home. There is a ton of resources out there. One of the places I always recommend going to is cartographersguild.com. They are a great source of pre-made maps, of all sorts of stuff. All of it's for free as long as you're not using it to put into a product or something to sell. They're really good about doing that, about letting you just use stuff for free for your home games and that kind of stuff. But you can also purchase stuff. One of my favorites to buy stuff from is Fiery Dragon Publishing, Skeleton Key Games. Ed Burrell's stuff is freaking amazing looking. And you can go to places like Drive Through RPG, RPG Now, DM's Guild. You can purchase all sorts of stuff through any one of those, who are primarily PDF publishers, but they do sell the straight up image files for a lot of these tiles. You can contact individual artists through like DeviantArt. You can find a bunch of cartographers there. You can also go to the stores for Roll20 and for Fantasy Grounds, and you can purchase their map packs off of their websites that are specifically coded to be a part of their programs.
So lots and lots of ways to get some content for your games then.
Oh, there are millions of ways. And of course, you can always make your own. GIMP is a free program that you can download that has nearly the same functionality as Photoshop. If you have access to Photoshop, then you can go ahead and you can make your own tiles using that. There are plenty of tutorials out there. In 2017, I'll be running tutorials as well on the YouTube channel called Campaign Critical. Some of them will go into using programs like Photoshop to help you design and find free resources that you can use for assets and for tile sets. So
that'd be good for all of us. Okay, here's one. How can I roleplay a character arc without A, my GM, or B, my group's prior knowledge? What this kind of boils down to is somebody wanting to roleplay a character that kind of changes along the line, but never really telling anybody how that pans out.
now, see, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of like the main character of a storybook deciding, without the author's prior knowledge, to go ahead and go off script. It doesn't really happen because, I mean, you can force the issue as a player. To be honest, you can force the issue to drag the game into a specific direction. However, for the enjoyment of all the rest of your companions, for the enjoyment of your game master, and for your own enjoyment, I would say be sure to include at least your game master in on what your ideas are and how they fit into his or her world. Because it could be that you're already on that story arc and don't realize that that your GM is bringing it in that direction, or it could be so phenomenal that they never, thought of it themselves and they just go with it.
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, I see that as one of those things where leaving your party out is pretty. It makes flavor, definitely, but if you leave the GM out, you're kind of leaving the guy out who's really taking you on this adventure, and if he doesn't know that all of a sudden you're going to turn into this evil thing that wants to stab everybody, it kind of ruins the story.
That's very true. Very, very true.
All right, we're going to go on to some equipment questions that I got here. And my first one here is the use of random weapons in a game. So, like, say somebody wants to fight with a giant spoon. How would you go about that? As in giving it special abilities, or would you just kind of look at it as like, oh, it's a giant spoon, now it's a mace?
Well, what I would do versus what somebody else would do. Why don't we go with the average answer first? It's actually covered in the player's handbook and in the DMG. It's called an improvised weapon. And the improvised weapon, its damage types, it's damage, and its die are both determined by certain factors, and its size and that kind of stuff. So a giant spoon, depending on how giant of a giant spoon we're talking about here. If you're talking about your grandmother's big wooden spoon that she hangs on her wall, okay, I would call that about a D4 to a D6 bludgeoning damage. Most game masters would. Now, I like to look at the colorful side of things. I have always been about story. I have always been about character development and about the weirdness that players get into. I would look at how does this equate to a weapon that could already be available. Like, for example, breaking a bottle and trying to stab somebody with a broken bottle. That is very close to a dagger. It might only be a 1 or 2 shot dagger, but it's a dagger. And I would give it that kind of damage. It should be piercing damage. And you could only do like a D4 with it. The giant spoon. A mace would definitely work. If it was a really big fucking spoon and it was made of metal and had all the extra little accoutrement all over it, then I might give it a D8, maybe even a D10. Make it a versatile weapon where you can use it one-handed or two-handed. So just peruse the weapons categories and stuff in the player's handbook and the DMG. Look for the improvised weapon sections, and they have a lot of really great information and examples.
All right, I really like the stat bonuses that the chat is putting on it, like +3 to save versus brain freeze.
That'd be kind of cool.
Right. So this one has to do with stacking items, and basically, if I'm wearing 2 rings of Enduring Arcane, or Bear Strength, or 2 belts of Hill Giant Strength, are those going to stack, or is that more of I've got 1 and that's all I get?
You can only receive the bonuses. You can only receive a specific bonus from a specific item once. So, like for example, 2 rings of protection that are both +1s. Actually, that's a bad example. 2 rings of bull's strength that both give you a +2 to strength. You would not get both of them. You'd only get one of them. Back in the day, like in 3rd edition and such, what we did was we looked at caster level and see which one had the higher caster level. We don't really have that anymore. So, but they don't stack. Like don't stack on the same slot. If you had an amulet that had bull strength and a ring that had bull strength, then those would stack.
So 2 separate items, definitely, but if you're wearing 2 rings, it's just making you look like a complete toolbag.
Exactly. And as Genghis just put it up in the chat as well, if you have even the same spell effect, it cannot stack more than once. You can only have 1. I do believe we have a question a little bit later on about the armor of, what is it, Agathir or something like that. It's the Warlock temporary hit point one that gives you 5 temporary hit points. It doesn't stack either. It just refreshes. Temporary hit points don't stack on temporary hit points, just like items don't stack on like items.
Yeah, you kind of beat me to that one. That was going to be the next question about the can you do a second casting of the Armor of Agathys, which does. It gives you 5 bonus hit points plus a time
gives cold damage for anybody who attacks you while the temporary hit points are up and that kind of stuff. So, yep.
And so that would just be a refresh, and which makes sense because you're not going to sit there and just be like, oh, let me cast this as many times as I can. Now I have 20 hit points.
And I'm doing 20 points of cold damage anytime you touch me.
Another one that kind of brought up from that one is like, say you have the ability to cast Stone Skin, and somebody else has the ability to cast Thorn Armor on you. Would that stack?
No. Once again, like bonuses, unlike bonuses. If something gives you a resistance versus giving you temporary hit points, then you would get the resistance and the temporary hit points. But if it's going to be like bonuses on like, once again, if one thing gives you temporary hit points, we'll say a spell gives you 20 temporary hit points and another spell gives you 15, it's up to the person whether or not they keep the 20 or they go with the 15, or, you know, they choose which of those temporary hit points they want to utilize. But on the same token, because let's be honest, anybody who picks 15 over 20 in a combat situation, that's just absolutely retarded. But in the case of like the armor that we were just talking about, the Warlock armor that does cold damage to an attacker, you may actually want to choose that because then it's kind of offensive as well as being defensive. So if you're going to choose one type of temporary hit points over another, you get the secondary effect as well, if there is one.
So really look at what you're getting. So that
exactly. Look at
the Stone Skin's great, but the Thorn Armor is going to do damage. Yeah. All right. So here's a little bit of an extensive one because I know this one we talked about. It's going to go for a bit. What is the best way for a novice like myself to get better acquainted with Fantasy Grounds, is there specific tutorials that you like over any others? And I'm not talking about myself, everyone.
Well, considering that Mint and I have actually sat down and had our own tutorials on this, this is not exclusive, once again, to Fantasy Grounds. This also goes to Roll20. I use Fantasy Grounds more than I do Roll20. But I did go through this morning after we had a very long conversation about Fantasy Grounds versus Roll20. I did sit down and do the full Roll20 tutorial this morning. And it leads you through by hand to show you every little single piece of everything, which was awesome. Absolutely awesome. And I really wish that Fantasy Grounds would do something like that as an automated system for a brand new game master or for a brand new player to have a way to sit down to say, this is how you use me. But it doesn't. Instead, Fantasy Grounds comes built with a tutorial campaign, a tutorial adventure already built into it that you learn how to use some of the basic functionality. For example, the combat tracker, rolling dice, modifiers, conditions, all sorts of things. I'll get to that in a second, Genghis. All sorts of things like that already built into it. Now, that being said, if we go outside of both of those programs and outside of their immediate tutorials, you can always go to YouTube and you can go to the Fantasy Grounds YouTube channel, or you can go to the Roll20 YouTube channel. And they have video tutorials that explain every nuance of each of their programs down to the most minute and dragged out detail on how to use everything.
Yeah, I've done that. That can be a pain.
Yes. So, that being said as well, the best way to learn either of those programs is, just like Nike used to say, just do it. You sit down, you find somebody who's willing to run a game or to play in one of your games, and you stumble through it. You test, you play with things, you fuck things up, you get things right. You do stuff, and you have fun learning.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, I've seen quite a few different tabletops out there for online. There's Fantasy Grounds and Roll20 are not you're like not locked into one or the other. There's a really cutesy one called able to maps, and you want to just run a game and you want to just kind of throw spice in there and do the story as it goes. That's a really great one. So I know that Fantasy Grounds is not the only one. We use it a lot, and having that as a knowledge and the ability to go forward and say, oh yeah, no, there's tons of ways you can go around it is actually really, really good.
All right, before you ask your next question, I was holding off on an announcement because I was waiting to watch a specific person get in here. And that person's here now. It's about the Blood of the Crown game. Now, as I said before, Season 2 for Blood of the Crown and Season 2 for Return of the Wraithborn, both of those will be starting in March. Also, starting in March is a third Wraithborn game called Beast Pits of Ravenna, which I am currently recruiting players for. I'm recruiting them from my Discord, so if you're not on my Discord, please get there so you can join it. For my Blood of the Crown players, since it is going to be 3 months away, because December, January, February, so 3 months plus some change away before you get to play your characters again, I have decided that I am going to run a Session 0 for each one of your characters, and the Session Zeros, and I apologize to my return players on this, these Session Zeros will be 3 sessions long, one-on-one tailored adventures from your backgrounds. So therefore, all of you can have your prequel adventures that you missed out on before starting our game.
I was gonna squeal, but I didn't want anybody's eardrums to bleed.
Well, I think the chat is squealing enough right now.
I kind of want to rub in the fact that I actually already knew about it, though.
Okay, yeah, you can let them know that you already knew about it, because I only told you about 2 hours ago.
Mwahaha. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh no, did you have something? Sorry.
Well, I do have something else. 2 of the Wraithborn characters, I'm not going to say what 2. Notice I said Wraithborn. I didn't say Return, I didn't say Blood, I didn't say Beast. I said Wraithborn. 2 of those characters are going to be getting some special love in the new year. Those 2 characters will be getting a 3 and one will be getting a 5 session game as a session 0. One of them, it is a setup for season 2 of one of the other games. One of them, it is a setup for Beast Pits. The one that is a setup for Beast Pits will start off as a single one-on-one Session 0 adventure, which will culminate in the collection of all of the rest of the Beast Pit players. And then that character will leave the party, and then the Beast Pit players will continue on with that adventure.
That's super cool. All right, back to questions. And I'm going to bring this one up because I think this one's fun. Can you use a small creature as a mount if you tied several of them together? Say, like tying a couple of flumps together and deciding to stand on them and fly around.
Now, when you and I had discussed this earlier when we were prepping for our episode tonight, the vision that I had going through my head was an ogre standing on the back of 2 halflings as they walked around. And I found that very amusing. But as we got talking about it more and more and more, I got thinking about the actual nitty-gritty rules of something like that. And this is what I've come up with. As long as the creature that is tying the small creatures to its feet does not weigh more than what the combined total carry weight is of these small creatures, then I could see it possibly working. Yes, you could have your chariot of flumps.
Well, no, chariot of flumps, that would be them pulling. That, I think if you got enough of them together, it wouldn't matter, would it?
Exactly. If you got enough of them together, yes, you could probably fly. It'd be really interesting sounding. I mean, just imagine the harmony of as you're puttering through a dungeon.
On Pooter, on Tutor, on Ripper.
Exactly. So you'd just be this giant floating fart cloud that just kind of went through, and you'd look sort of silly and cool all at the same time. So, but once again, as long as your weight, we'll say you weigh 200 pounds, and the small creatures can each hold, we'll say 80 pounds as a maximum that they can still move, utilize their movement. You'd need to have 3 of them at that point, because 2 of them wouldn't be able to carry you with 160 pounds between the 2 of them. So I could see it working. We had a example as you and I were goofing around of a necromancer and a carpet of crawling claws to ride around on.
Which is just creepy.
Which is creepy as shit. But it's still, I mean, if you think about it, it kind of explains away some of these weird encounters people have. It's like, okay, there's a necromancer and 15 crawling claws. Why are there just 15 random crawling claws? Well, now we know. He rode them there.
So many hand jokes, so little time. All right. So this one was a fun one we were talking about. Could you use shape water to cause erosion? I.e., could you use shape water on a lock or a hinge and then freeze it to expand the metal and break it?
Oh, that is right up my alley. I love shit like that. Now, if a player came to me and said, hey, I'm going to use shape water, I'm going to take water out of my water skin, I'm going to shove it in the lock, and then I'm going to use, I don't know, like Ray of Frost, and I'm going to freeze it to burst the lock. That is so complicated and retarded sounding that I would have to allow at least an arbitrary die roll of some kind just to let it happen. Rules wise, there is no rules for it. This is, once again, it's all a game master call. This is cinematic role playing right here. This is the good stuff that we like want to dig down and find the weirdest possible shit to do. That's one of the weirdest possible things I could think of, is doing something like that.
Follow-up question, not even close to the same thing, actually. Just has to do with the cinematics is, could a party potentially feign being a monster and fend off a group of NPCs or other monsters? So if your party's walking along and you know you're about to face off against some orcs and you cannot fight them with the 3 people in your party, could you guys try and pretend to be a basilisk to scare them away?
In the red box set, we talked about the red box set earlier today. In the red box set of basic Dungeons and Dragons from the mid 70s to early 80s, there is actually a picture in there when it talks about encounter distances of a wizard using his hands and casting a shadow on the wall, using the cleric's mace as a source of light to make the shape of a monster on the wall, while the rogue is pounding, I think it was coconut shells against the wall, and the fighter was making growling noises. That is the perfect basic D&D, I'm going to scare the shit out of something like the orcs in the next room. That is so D&D, it's not even funny, is the party being a monster. It's normal. In today's D&D, you don't see it as often because, let's be honest, in video games, people aren't creative, and that carries over into our tabletop gaming. People just don't get creative anymore, on average. You do have your extraordinary players, which everybody who is a listener of mine is an extraordinary player. These are considered to be normal things back in the 70s and 80s. Today, it would be like, wow, I need rules for that. No, you don't need rules for that. You need to have an imagination. So as long as the party has an imagination and they're willing to say the wizard does this, the cleric does that, the rogue does this, the fighter does that, to make this monster come to life to scare something, I would allow it. And I would give you skill checks and your spells and all sorts of stuff, and I would still give you the experience points for defeating whatever encounter it was for doing something like that.
So great to bring it up. Just make sure that your lawyer paladin and your secretary cleric aren't around when you do it.
If they are, tell them to fuck off and enjoy themselves.
All right, so this one was an extensive one about action economy. So can a fighter / rogue, so somebody who has multi-classed, use a sneak attack on their normal turn and then an action surge and then a sneak attack again? Or something along the lines of, could you use a bonus action in between 2 of your regular attacks?
Those are actually 2 entirely separate questions. The one about the sneak attack and the fighter. You can only sneak attack once per round. Period. I'm sorry, you can only do that once per turn. It says it right there in the rules, you can only do it once per turn. Yes, I do understand that an action surge does give you, basically resets your turn, and it allows you to take a certain number of actions, etc., 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 but it does not allow you to reset the rogue sneak attack ability. You only get that once. The second question, being the taking a bonus action in the middle of an attack action, well, I don't see any issue with being able to do that. Because, for example, we have a paladin in the Friday game who is able to make 2 attacks in a round. He makes 1 attack, and we'll say he kills a goblin, but he hasn't taken his move action yet. Well, he's allowed to still take his move to move to the next goblin to attack that one. Why wouldn't he be allowed to take a bonus action in there as well? Or why wouldn't he be allowed to, for example, the rogue or the ranger who's using an offhand weapon, which is typically a bonus action to use offhand weapons? You attack once with your right hand, once with your left, which would be your bonus attack, and then once again with your right, because you have 2 attacks per round. That's a bonus action. I think what this player or this person who's asking this question is asking is, could the rogue with 2 attacks be able to do a disengage or a stealth or some other such thing mid-fight? Well, once again, it all depends if all the rest of the environmental effects are in place for him to be able to do those kinds of things. Because I could see him stabbing somebody, taking a disengage action, and then stabbing somebody else. I can see that happening.
It kind of goes along with that classic, like, I'm using a sneak attack. No, you're standing in front of me.
Exactly. It's like, after you've hit me once, I know where you are. So I'm not going to mistake the idea of the fact that I just got stabbed in the kidney with the fact that, oh, I was surprised that I got stabbed in the kidney a second time. No, that's not going to happen.
It's not Skyrim where you can shoot the guy in the eye and he's like, who's that? Oh, it must be nothing.
Exactly. I was an adventurer once until I took an arrow to the knee. Now you know why they all took arrows to the knee.
Fun little history fact, that actually means they got married. So my next one here, this was another one we had a little fun with. What's the best way to engage in a fight with a Tarrasque?
With a Tarrasque? The best way to engage? The best way to engage in a fight with a Tarrasque is don't. Don't do it. Alright, a Tarrasque is a CR30 Titan creature. There's multiple Titan types that are out there, but the Tarrasque is the one that's in the monster manual that everybody seems to have a hard-on over trying to go beat. Okay, a CR30, just for the basics of mathematics here for you, CR30 means that 4 30th level characters will be using 50% of all of their resources in order to down this single creature. There is no level 30. So therefore, it would take a lot of level 20s to go ahead and fuck with it. Now, a Tarrasque is not something that you just randomly come across in a dungeon. Well, unless you're using certain, wonkadoodle crit tables or something. It's not something that you're going to run across in a dungeon. Tarrasques are the Godzilla monster of D&D. They are meant to fight and to destroy cities. As such, they're also meant to be fought with a city. A 20th level player goes and grabs, the town guards from the northern watchtower, and they all go rushing off with ballistas and catapults to attack it from this direction, while the mage takes the wizards guild and rises them all up, and they go and they attack from the river, and it's supposed to be an epic encounter. It's supposed to be the players are leading armies of people to their death, granted, but armies to go beat this huge creature and possibly defeat it. And if they do, they've etched their names into the annals of history forever because they are that epic. Otherwise, don't go near one. It's like a woman in a flannel and comfortable shoes. It's a protective dike. Don't go near there.
Unless you got one of those dungeon masters that's like, and then as you turn this nice, beautiful corner with the flowers and the trees, there's a Tarrasque.
Along with its mate and 4 babies. Yeah, that's when you know that your game master hates you, and this is the end of the game right here.
I got a good comment while we were going on about that, about trying to sucker it into Tiamat's lair. And that was another good one that I came across for the legendaries was Tiamat, which didn't come out that long ago, really, did it?
Ooh, I just saw a question. I like this question. Are there such things as siege magic? Yes. Yes, there is siege magic. If you go through the objects section of the DMG, it's where they have things like the armor class and hit points for stone doors. I believe it's page 260 something. I'm right there. It's plus or minus 20 pages, around 250, 260. In there, they have rules on siege, and they also have rules on how to determine player character damage versus like a siege tower and siege equipment. So yes, technically there are siege spells, there are siege abilities, and you can indeed use those in, like, for example, a fight with a Tarrasque. You know, you could break out the ballista and boil it down. Hell, matter of fact, that'd be a great idea with the Tarrasque. Instead of Tarrasque having typical hit points and typical armor class, you give it a siege hit point and a siege armor class, and you treat it like a siege tower or a fortification that you're attempting to assault. That's actually a perfect way of doing it.
A building that bites back.
Exactly. Back in the day in D6 Star Wars, when West End Games used to produce Star Wars, they actually had multiple different types of damage. It all worked the same way, but at different levels. They had character level damage. They had speeder level damage. They had starship level damage, and then they had capital ship level damage. So it was like 4 or 5 different types of damage. Please forgive me; it's been 20 years since I read the damage types for D6 Star Wars. They had like 4 or 5 different types, and each one of them scaled specifically to them. So, for example, a character running up with a carbine. And would shoot it at a capital ship, we'll say like a Super Star Destroyer, the damage was negligible. Where it would vaporize another player character, it was negligible to the capital ship, without making the capital ship having ridiculous hit points or a ridiculous armor class of any kind. But at the same token, like 66 damage from a capital ship actually converted into something like 160 d6 for a character. I mean, it was, the conversion levels and stuff were really interesting. It was very simple to do, and it was something like one capital ship point was like 6 starship. One starship was like 6. I mean, it was all based on 6s. So it was like, you work backwards. So one capital ship damage ended up equaling something like 30 or 60 damage to a character. So even on its minimum damage, it was still like obliterating like villages worth.
Soldier versus ship, bad. Ship versus soldier, very good.
But the soldier, on the other hand, had the ability to have a higher armor class against the capital ship, because the capital ship wasn't used to targeting something that small and that pinpoint. So therefore, he could dance around the edges of the blasts that were coming down. It made for some really epic fights.
Could kind of use that in a way of like a dragon fight too, as the fire comes at you, you're just like, nah, I'll just stand over here.
Exactly. See, and that's why I always have said to people that just because D&D says this is my rule here and this is my rule there, doesn't mean you can't take something from another system and use it in your game to make it better, to make things look, more entertaining, to throw the rules lawyers off their scent, to turn the game on its ear. I mean, in my own games, in Friday's game and in Sunday's game, I have used 4th edition skill check encounters, because you'd have to have X number of successes before Y number of failures. I've used Pathfinder chase rules to hunt down villains through a city. So I've used many, many, many different types of things.
So I was going to ask another question, but because of your little go off there, I'm going to have to issue a trigger warning. So Jeff, what you're telling me is you like to mix up that homebrew, huh?
None of that's homebrew. That's all legal stuff from other game systems. It's called kit bashing. That's not homebrew. Don't get me started on homebrew. Homebrew is going to be, as of the end
You told
of
me
this,
to, and I'm trying to.
as of the end of this episode of this show today, I am going to go into all of my bots, and homebrew is going to be a naughty word from this point forward in Discord and on my Twitch channel. That way, it always gets blocked out, because I hate homebrew. Homebrew is a bad word. Homebrew is okay. I will quote what I put in Discord earlier today. Homebrew is taking the swill that you've brewed in your sink, filtering it through your sock, and calling it a craft beer. That is what homebrew is for the role-playing community. Please stop using homebrew. Everybody, stop using homebrew. The moron down the street who made the super powerful rogue that can cast lightning bolt out of his eyeballs at level 1 is a fucking moron, and he needs to be burned at the stake. Please stop using homebrew. It's not good. Please don't.
Oh, such a segue into the next one. Okay, let's go a different route for a little bit here. So, could a monster kill you in a single round? And since we were talking about the monster that I cannot pronounce, he should not be named. Could it kill you in a single round? Say if it had the ability of grab, constrict, and swallow, and was able to use those.
Okay, we talked about this earlier. We used the example of a giant constrictor snake being able to attack a person and swallow them, basically killing them all in one go. But at the same time, we'll also use the Tarrasque here in a second as well. As far as a giant constrictor snake goes, it requires a hit in order to get a grab for its grapple. On its next round, it's able to constrict or swallow. Those are its things. So no, you cannot kill a character in a single go with a giant constrictor snake. However, utilizing the Tarrasque, which by the way is a legendary creature, who has additional actions and has some very interesting mechanics, it will pick people up and throw it into its mouth as an action. That is a mechanic in and of itself, specific to that creature. Purple worms are another one that will gobble you up in one giant bite, but that is because that is its attack. Its attack is to swallow you. I believe Dragon Turtle still has that ability. It's the same thing. I'm looking at the chat. We don't kill stupid people, Jeff. That's fascism. We allow stupid to breed.
Right, I read that. I actually got one that came across from the chat in Discord for you specifically as a DM. Of all the players that you've had, what class has been your most powerful in D&D 5e?
Of all the players I've had? Well, see, this is where, okay, I'm going to have to say the bad word. Don't make me say the bad word, but I'm going to say the bad word.
Not the bad word, Daddy!
Yes, I'm going to have to say the naughty word. The reason why I don't like the naughty word, homebrew, the reason I don't like it, and it goes right along with this question about which class has been the most powerful. The reason I don't like homebrew is because homebrew makes one class more powerful than the rest of them. Or makes one spell more powerful, or one monster more powerful, or one this powerful or that powerful. It makes something more powerful. That is wrong. That's why homebrew sucks. It's called feature creep. Feature creep is bad. Anybody who's ever designed a game, from a tabletop game to a board game to a a video game, any kind of game, feature creep is the worst possible thing that can ever possibly happen to a game. It kills games. Therefore, saying that, because nearly everything is balanced in the basic game of D&D, it actually makes it difficult for most people to be able to choose what they want to do. For example, if you're going to be a ranger in the new, I will utilize the Unearthed Arcana version of the ranger, not the one that's in the player's handbook. If you use the Unearthed Arcana version of the ranger, choosing one of his archetypes is actually a difficult thing to do, because you're looking at the bonuses and penalties of each one going, which one do I want to do? And what it finally boils down to is, what is your character's flavor? What is his background? What do you like to play? That is the way games are supposed to be played. That's why I can't really answer that of all of my players, and I've had quite a few. What class is the most powerful? There is no such thing as the most powerful, because they are all equally powerful, because they're all balanced.
I find this really good, and it seems like a lot of people are really kind of into this little subject here. So I'm going to bounce a couple things off of you about it, since it does have to deal with some of our questions. But really, when you're looking at it, homebrew takes away the balance and the fun of what D&D is, because it makes a player more OP. I mean, it just makes them overpowered no matter what. But do you think that when you use, say, a custom character, that does the same thing, or is your custom character really giving more spice to a character that is pretty normal?
I don't mind custom characters. Things that are designed well make it so it's the player who's the forefront. This homebrew overpowering thing, where it's retarded not to be this, that throws everything out of balance. That throws everything out of whack. That's what makes the game no longer fun. And as the game master side of it, I root for my players. Yes, I'm the one who makes the encounters, I'm the one who does this, and I'm the one who does that to them. But I root for my players. I give them things to do. I root for my players. I want them to succeed. And I'm able to balance the encounter in such a way that I know what the pacing is going to be. I know almost down to the die roll exactly how it's going to fall. And I can root for them. I know that, okay, a couple of bad dice rolls in a row, I need to give them a little help here. I have that help ready and set to go. But having one of these overpowered characters that sits there and is just like, I can flick my wrist and, make this thing disintegrate, and I have got, beholder tentacles as fingers, that kind of stuff you can't plan around, because that power level just doesn't exist. And you'd have to create an entirely new power level to challenge that player. But at the same time, if one player is playing that OP character, the other 3, 4, 5 other players who are at the table who are playing normal characters will have difficulty trying to catch up to him. And that's where the feature creep comes in again. It's that, goblins no longer have a +3 to hit. Now they have a +17, because that's the only way I can freaking even challenge the Uber Rogue over there who has Shadow Step 640 times a day. If that's the case, then that's what you got to watch out for.
It's kind of taking that video game hero and putting it into a game where you need to be cooperative with everybody. Which brings up this question, which is a really good one. That is, what's the best way to go about killing characters without making their players too angry? And from somebody who I know doesn't mind murdering the entire blood group, what do you think about that?
Okay. It's not a recommended tactic for all game masters, and it's not a recommended tactic for all game tables. I can see killing an entire party for 3 reasons. Number 1, you're trying to teach them a lesson. My son just did this with his group on Sunday last week. Matter of fact, the same time I was killing you guys, he was killing his players in his game. Except he was trying to instill a lesson on them. The lesson he was teaching them was you can go into a combat that is not going to go in your favor, and you always have the option to run away. Sometimes with casualties, but you do have the option to run away. I utilized a different method of killing my players. My players dying was actually wrapped into the enjoyment of each individual player. Their characters dying was like them, literally, I mean, everybody knew, and I said this right off the beginning, that it was the final episode of the season. And all of you had that niggling little irksome spirit in the back of your head whispering naughty things in the back of your ears saying, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. So you were all already hyped up and waiting for it to happen to you. And you were expecting it, and you kind of wanted to see it. And you had that moment of, oh no, I'm the hero and I died, the bad guys won. And you had that look on your faces, and you had that tone in your voices, and the drama happened right there. And at that dramatic moment is why it happened, because it was for a dramatic effect. And it worked really well. The players were into it, the game master was into it, so therefore it just worked well. Now the last reason, and I have never done this. I have one player who is not in my chat right now who would yell and scream at me that I have done this, but I have never done this on purpose, I should say, and that is to off a group of characters or a specific character because they no longer fit in the party. Whether it is the player personality, whether it is the group dynamic, but this one person or multiple people are the odd person or people out of the group. They're the ones that nobody likes to play with. They're the ones who are a pain in the ass. You know, they're the ones who are always bringing everybody down, and you got to get rid of them. I've seen DMs use this method. I have been in games where DMs have used this method and have wiped out entire parties just so that person didn't come back the following week. And I don't recommend it. I've never recommended it, but the rest of the party was into it. So the game master was good with it, and so they all decided to do it. That is the dark side of killing all the player characters, but it happens. And as a game master, I have to caution all other game masters, if you're going to kill the players as a story, dramatic event, you need to make sure that the players understand it. That they understand that there's something coming, that they're willing to allow this to happen, and that there are ways for them to get through it. Whether it is a new character, and this is, by the way, the cheesiest way of doing it, a dream sequence, or whether it is the rebirth or the renewal or the introduction of a new NPC or character, as was in Blood, where it was an introduction. Once again, no more spoilers. No spoilers there. If it's one of those things and the players are into it, then by all means go ahead and try it. This also includes, by the way, maiming player characters. Basically removing their ability to play as they would normally play. I did this in the Friday game. I removed the rogue's hands. The rogue has no hands. For 2 weeks beforehand, that player and myself had actually sat down and we had talked and said, there's things coming, go with it. This is what's going to be happening to you. I didn't tell him everything that was happening to him because he still needed to have some surprise in his life. But because of the type of player he is, I know that he'll be able to overcome it by finding other things his character can do.
Like pick locks with his beard.
Yes, like pick locks with his beard or to shocking grasp with his stump, that kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, the first person who actually yelled anything about what character it was is actually a viewer and not the actual player who's sitting here.
That's hilarious. Okay, so this one was one that we were talking about that does come up a lot and seems to be one of those ones that people aren't 100% sure on. But how does dark vision work, and are there ways to modify it? I mean, we know dark vision gives you 60 feet of vision in the dark. You see 30 feet, and then you see 30 feet past that with a grayscale type color. But a lot of people seem to have questions about that.
Well, okay. Once again, multiple ways depending on what you want to utilize as your tool of choice. For most tabletop gamers and for most Fantasy Grounds players, the thing is like, for example, if I had 60-foot dark vision, then you make a circle around you that's 60 feet, and you say, I can see everything here. If you're a Roll20 player, or if you play by the way the rules are written in the book, that same 60 foot is actually 30 foot of black and white at a regular vision, like you would see in a regular, like a lit room kind of thing. Or, well, not or, and then 30 more feet of dim, as if you saw that same room with a candle lit instead. Also, grayscale, black and white. Thankfully, Roll20 has the ability with dynamic lighting to be able to do something like that. I'm looking forward to seeing Fantasy Grounds utilize the same thing. And there are many, many players who do it on tabletop that way. The bookkeeping aspect of it is freaking insane, though, as tabletop. If it's not automatically being generated for you, it is absolutely nuts. But dark vision technically is 30 feet and then 30 more feet. That's what it is. That's what the technicality of it is. I use, in my game, just for the simplicity's sake of it, I use 60 feet all the same.
You see, 60 feet, that matters.
Okay. Well, we are actually overtime for tonight. We've had a lot of nice questions. I've had some pretty long and lengthy ass answers, and I've had some pretty good bants with all of you. And yes, I will indeed be putting that damn nasty word in the naughty word file. But right now it is time for doing the drawing for Dandy, also known as Life of the Candy Alchemist, and 600,000 other fucking words that are on this goddamn piece of paper. I will give everybody 2 more minutes to go ahead and buy a ticket while I answer one more question. Make it a short question, please, Mint. I'll answer one more question. At the end of this answer, I will do the drawing. So you have until, this is the last call for raffle tickets. Last call. Once again, exclamation point tickets and the number of tickets you want. Your first ticket is free. All the rest cost 5 experience points each. So, all right, Mint, go ahead and ask me one more.
Okay, so to make it easy, I'm going to go with the one that we kind of went over with. But using telekinesis to break a grapple, can I do it?
Okay, yes, we did go through this earlier, and we actually sat down and determined what the DCs and everything are. Telekinesis is considered to be a concentration spell. And while you're grappled, technically you're not getting any damage done to you. I would say, because of the idea of concentrating on the spell, you would need to roll a DC Constitution saving throw in order to cast the spell, as if you had been damaged while casting a concentration spell. Since there is no damage being done out, the minimum DC would be a DC 10. So you need to make a DC 10 concentration check. And then, yes, indeed, you could break the grapple. Because in the rules of the telekinesis spell, you can actually grapple a person at range and hang them in the air for an amount of time. And basically grapple them from a distance with your mind. So I can see telekinesis bursting somebody from a grapple. Yes.
Cool beans. Use your mind to break free from somebody grappling you.
Yes. That's mind bullets. Telekinesis, Kyle.
And the monk deflects them with his fists.
Oh, don't even go there. Don't even go there.
I knew that was too long of a question. All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are closing ticket purchases in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Closed. Alrighty, we had 343 tickets bought for it.
I like Genghis's little last-minute purchase there of 99 tickets. Somebody wants this game.
I want this game, yo. I want it. Here we go. We're going to draw the winner right now. And Genghis won it. Congratulations, Genghis. Genghis, be sure to whisper me in Discord your email address, so that way I can send this to you. I will send you a direct scan of it. All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, that will be it for this evening's episode of Game Masters 911. On behalf of myself and Susie Q, I'd like to thank you for joining us. And I would like to put out a special thanks to Mr. Mint for taking care of Susie's spot for her and keeping her seat warm. Thank you, sir.
Oh, I enjoyed it a bunch, and thank you guys for everything you did, and stay fresh out there.
All right, everybody. You have a great night. And once again, if you want to get in touch with us, jump on Discord. If you want to join in one of our games, jump on Discord. We'll see you there.